Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the increasing number of reports linking public contracts worth a lot of money in total going to companies with links to government ministers or Dominic Cummings, for example. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So we know how Conservative governments fleece the country for their own benefit under normal circumstances. You know, you get a private company to give the Conservative Party a donation, need only be £10,000–20,000 sometimes, and the government in return will give you the contract worth millions, sometimes tens of millions. Classic corruption that they keep getting away with. From the Conservatives' point of view, it's absolutely brilliant because this business owner will just see the party donation as an investment. So they're not losing anything because they're going to be given this big contract, and you're not going to analyse the quality of their work too closely. In return, your party gets a hefty donation, which you get to use to purchase the services of some of the best liars in the world when it comes to your election campaigns. But under cover of the coronavirus, the fleecing is just blatant on a scale the like of which we've never seen. The same government that argued that the reason, back in the day when Labour were trying to push the government on, why is it taking you so long to get this PPE in? We've got British companies producing PPE and exporting it abroad, and they say they're not getting NHS orders. Why is this? And the government argued the reason why it was taking so long is because they had to go through a very careful procurement process where they vet the various providers, check what they're getting, that is what they want, and that it's the best value for money. In other words, a normal tendering process. But obviously what we now know happened is that they were giving those contracts to companies without any tender process at all. They hadn't gone through to lots of other providers. They'd gone to the people they wanted to give this money to. And they argue now when they're asked, so why have you given this huge sum of money to this company without throwing it out to tender? Why did other providers not know about this contract? So now what they argue is, well, it's an emergency, isn't it? We're using emergency regulations because we haven't got time to act normally. Now, for my money, you don't get to do that both ways. You've got to pick one. If you are claiming an emergency situation, and of course the coronavirus pandemic absolutely is an emergency situation, and you are going to use the emergency regulations, which, have been passed by Parliament, sort of, to act in all haste to access the goods or services that the contract is for, then we expect it to be provided quickly. If you had to act quickly, we expect that contract being given out quickly. And if you're not going to act quickly, if you're going to wait many weeks or even months before you award that contract, then we expect there to have been a tender process where all suitable providers were able to be involved, one or the other. You don't get to approach companies, especially ones who don't even provide the goods or services that the contract is for, and then offer them the money without even letting genuine providers know about it, and at the same time take bloody ages over it. Chris Grayling, remember Chris Grayling, I hope? He was the guy, amongst other things, he was, and I know before the comments come in, yes, I know he's very likely to be the chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee now, never mind. But he was the guy who awarded, for Brexit purposes, a ferry contract to a company that not only has no ferries, but had no experience of delivering a ferry service either. Oh, we laugh about that. Oh, hilarious waste of public money. But this is now going on an epic scale, because as a result of these emergency contracts, we gave an accountancy firm the contract for COVID testing, who promptly asked it up, instead of NHS England, who would not have asked it up. We gave a contract worth over £100 million for medical PPE to a company that employs 16 people to catch rats. Another sizable PPE contract to a company that doesn't employ anyone at all. 12 million quid, 11 or 12 million quid to an associate, i.e. drinking buddy, of Dominic Cummings to develop a tracing app that was completely abandoned. Not just an inefficient use of time and money, a complete waste. All of that money is pissed away, literally. We don't have anything to show at the end of it, not as much as we'd like, nothing at all. And there are multiple examples of this sort of heinous waste. And all of these contracts are just given directly to people that the Conservatives have specifically targeted, not as being suitable, not as being people who are able to provide these goods or services, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to a company that you know is the only one that can really fulfill this contract. No way they could fulfill the contract. And the latest one being reported now is, I suppose, a relatively paltry £840,000. Not even £1 million. £840,000 to carry out government research, to do focus groups, get public opinion. And it just so happens that this group have links with, again, Dominic Cummings, as well as Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. And yet again, the government justified the contract being awarded without the normal procedures that are legally required. These aren't just, guidelines, legal requirement, on the basis of the emergency. So the same they use in the emergency regulations. Now, we need to keep a very, very sharp eye out here, because the government are pulling all sorts of things under the guise of emergency powers. And also remember, well, you may not remember, I'll remind you anyway, when these emergency powers were being voted to the government, they wanted these powers for a full 2 years. Now, Parliament beat them down to at least touching base after 6 months. So, in September, mid to late September, Parliament should be checking and deciding whether Boris Johnson still needs these. Of course, he's done his best to ensure that there's still going to be a healthy, or rather unhealthy, emergency in full swing at this point. The Chief Medical Officer, I'll keep reminding people, says he doesn't expect the situation to improve until next spring at least, thus giving Boris Johnson a minimum of a year of these emergency powers. But consider yourself why it was that Boris Johnson would want emergency powers for a full 2 years for a pandemic that he boasted at the time that he wanted them for 2 years, that he'd be dealing with pretty quickly. It'd be sorted this summer. Be done this summer. The shit that they are pulling with these powers that we know of may only be scratching the surface. And I don't think it's an overreaction to say that our democracy has never, ever been under threat like it is right now. I am genuinely concerned about what's going to happen over the next few years. Bugger his chances in 2024 is gone long before then. Whether someone just as bad will take his place, I don't know. Never mind that. What permanent damage is he still going to do in the time left to him if the Conservatives do not get rid of him quite soon? But back to that contract. And you might wonder, with billions of pounds in total going to dodgy companies and being badly wasted on the basis of these emergency powers, what's with making a special issue of an £840,000 contract? Yes, very, very terrible, Phil, with the Dominic Cummings link and the Michael Gove, but there's a lot more money being thrown towards their mates. Yeah, but my reading of it is maybe it's a bit of an Al Capone thing here. Guy who committed quite terrible crimes, but what was pinned on him in the end was probably the least of his crimes. In his case, not paying his taxes properly. Something relatively minor when you consider what he got up to. And I'm just wondering if the same thing might apply here, because this contract, that the government keep claiming, it's the emergency compelling them to offer this contract, because this contract for these focus groups was also just given to a company, no tender process. And they're saying, well, that's because it's an emergency, Now, we know this is bollocks, but it's hard to argue against that general, line of thinking in a court of law. I suspect, not a legal expert, but if it's for something like medical equipment, like PPE, or other services that are clearly linked to the coronavirus, maybe it's tricky to really demonstrate that it wasn't the company you should have used. However, this contract was used, or supposed to be used, to research COVID-19 issues. But the bulk of the work that they did was actually related to Brexit. Now, these emergency powers, it's not just, oh, there's an emergency, you get all these powers as such. They specifically have to be used for the coronavirus emergency, not just any old thing that they like. Even though Brexit is an emergency, it's not the named emergency in the regulations. And that makes it a clear breach of the law. And that, I suspect, is what the Good Law Project are aiming to demonstrate. So these are the guys who were very much involved in taking the government to task over the prorogation of Parliament last year, for example. So they've opened up legal proceedings against the government for a judicial review into a whole range of procurements. And this one has now been included too, I gather. And according to reports in The Guardian, which I'm going to link below, so you can read the whole, it's worth reading this article yourself, paints a picture of some very dodgy behaviour, and very poor covering of their tracks. But I'll let you read it yourself rather than just parrot it. But for my money, what I'm hoping is that maybe this is the smoking gun, for example, that gives it the legal impetus to draw attention to the entire process of procurement, even if what swings it is this relatively modest outlay of public money. But public money that almost certainly and quite clearly has been used unlawfully. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. Until next time, I'll see you later.